Wine glared her twin sister, who was talking with her mother. Annie smiled, her mother's laugh filling up the room. She crossed her arms around over her chest. Wine looked around the room at her parent and brother before facing her sister again. She sighed and rolled her eyes. Wine shrugged, a sad smile appearing on her lips. Wine made a disgusting face at her sister, making everyone laugh. She replied with a smug grin, and he raised an eyebrow at her and Wine groaned. Wine stood up and left the house, leaving her twin alone. Her mother smiled warmly at her. Mrs. Min nodded her head and smiled. He leaned on the door frame and looked back at his wife, a wide smile on his lip. Jungkook stepped into the house and sat next to Anhee. Jungkook noticed his wife's smile and chuckled. He asked as Annie gave him a glass of water. She said, making him nod his head. He looked over at his beautiful wife. Jungkook opened his mouth but didn't say anything. After a while, he decided to change the topic. Annie nodded and stood up with her husband. As they reached outside, Annie turned towards her mother. He hugged her mother tightly and then walked away. Mrs. Min waved her hand and smiled as soon as her daughter got in the car. He scolded her gently, but she ignored him. He grabbed the bottle from her hand, trying to prevent her from finishing all the wine in the glass. She was holding the glass too tight, causing it to shatter into tiny pieces over the floor. He quickly grabbed her hand and looked at her in concern. She whispered. Jungwoo pulled her closer and wrapped his arm around her waist, letting her rest her head over his shoulder. He could feel tears staining his shirt, and he knew what she was thinking about. He patted her hair softly. She sniffled loudly. The question was eating her alive. She had been wanting to talk about it for a while, and now that she finally did, she couldn't hold it any longer. She cut him off angrily. She shouted at him angrily before turning her gaze away to stare blankly into space. Jungkook placed a hand on her cheek. He slowly moved his thumb back and forth across her soft cheekbones. She felt so cold. He smiled slightly and she returned the same gesture. He cupped her cheeks in his large hand and gave them a small kiss. They stared that for a while, enjoying the comfort each other provided. Then Jungkook pulled away slowly. He stared at her for a few seconds before standing up, putting an empty glass on the table. He sat and smiled. Jungkook checked the time in his wristwatch and looked at Anhi again. She chuckled, knowing the exact reason behind this woman's behavior. Anhi nodded her head and was about to call YN, but before she could dial her number, she came. She huffed and leaned against Jungkook's arm. Jungkook smiled fondly at her. YN nodded her head, totally avoiding his gaze. She held Jungwon's arm, catching him to look at her. Her voice barely above a whisper. He sat and placed his jacket over her shoulders. Her cheek turned red and she glanced at Jungkook. She grabbed Jungkook's sleeve and dragged him towards the table. Vine smiled and followed them. Four of them were sitting on the dining table at the restaurant. It was Vian's birthday, so Jungkook wanted her to have a dinner with them, since she didn't celebrate it last year. Jungkook asked Vian, who looked at him and smiled. She said bitterly, making Jungkook frown. Jungkook smiled a bit relieved as he took a drink from his glass of water. Anhi asked, smiling widely. Vian smiled at Anhi. Anhi's eyes lit up. Vian shook her head no as Anhi frowned a bit. Annie pouted a bit upon hearing this, and Jungkook chuckled softly. He asked as she looked at him with puppy eyes. She rolled her eyes, not believing in what she had just heard. She whined and pouted, and he grinned happily. She cheered and jumped up and down. She stopped jumping around and faced Jungkook. She whispered, causing everyone to laugh. Jungkook tied her helmet and checked once again. Annie thumbs up, showing him that she is all fine. He nodded his head and put on his helmet. He asked her as he turned the engine of his motorcycle. She nodded and got on the bike. Jungkook looked at his other side and smiled as he saw Ryan and Jungwon on the bike. Ryan scoffed at this remark. He said confidently and took a deep breath. With that, he revved the engine. The roar made Annie flinch in shock, and she instinctively gripped onto Jungkook's tighter.